Okay, so this video is for anyone painting for the first time ever or the first time in a while. It's especially useful for landscapes, but really this is a technique you can do and should do for any painting, a still life, a portrait, abstract, anything that's the first painting you're faced with, that daunting blank canvas. If you do this first, you'll find your way into the painting a lot easier. It isn't something that takes a lot of skill, you can do it right away, and it'll quickly make you more skillful as a painter. You're looking for some progress, not perfection here, so just hang with what I'm going to tell you how to do this. Some color mixing exercises. Mostly in this video I'm going to tell you why to do it, and then I'll get into how to do it in a second video about mixing up landscape greens, where I'll also give you some recipes for that. But no matter what your subject matter, before you even try to do anything on your canvas or board or what have you, you should do some color mixing studies, which is like what this is here. Basically, you're making swatches of different colors by mixing the paint in your tubes with a goal of looking for the colors that you think, by looking at your subject matter, that you're going to need. So I want you to start thinking about the painting almost as if it was a song that you are trying to play. You're learning how to play an instrument, and the colors of your subject matter are the notes that you need to hit. And this is how you learn how to play the notes. For a mixture, maybe it's more accurate to say chords, as it's really a combination of colors you need to learn, similar to a chord being several notes on your fretboard or piano. And then depending on the intensity or brightness of the color is like your high notes and low notes that you're going to use. Um, just to take that metaphor a bit further, the reason this exercise should be done by any beginning painter or a painter who just needs to shake the rust off is, if you imagine that you're being taught a song and you learn the four chords for that song, but then the next song uses a couple of different ones, well, you might forget that other one the next time when you need to go and learn your third song, or your fourth song. So, but what will happen then is after you've learned a bunch of chords, you'll probably figure out that a lot of them have the same chords in them, and you won't have to think so much about how to make them each and every time. But this is to help you get started. Now, it doesn't have to be a landscape. But this is especially important if you're going to do landscape painting, because you're going to have to probably deal with the color green a lot, and green has such a wide range of different types that you can find in nature and that you'll have to try and match as best you can. So that's why I put this out as your first landscape painting. You're going to make up a bunch of greens. A lot of painters will tell you that green is the most challenging color to try to navigate. There's that old quote from Picasso about how you can buy all types of various tubes of green, but the green they'll sell you is never that particular green you're looking for. And, that is true. It's definitely more challenging, but if you don't want this type of a challenge, then landscape painting probably isn't really for you. If you don't learn how to get a range of greens, you're going to paint a picture that looks like a green screen with no depth. The vegetation won't look natural. It'll just look like a cartoon. If you talk to most landscape painters, they'll often recommend you mix greens yourself, even if they still use, even if they sometimes use tubed greens. The reason they recommend you mix them is so you can learn when to make a mixture and when it's okay to reach for that tubed green. And so the tube greens, like the popular ones, are like Viridian, Hooker's green, sap green. But if you're going to start off making some greens, start off with your ultramarine and your cadmium yellow. Um, Start off with your yellow ochre and your black, and that will give you some landscape greens, some natural landscape greens. Um, and so I've used a bunch of different ones up here, and that's what this technique should help you with. Making swatches of your mixes and seeing what potential colors you can make with the tubes you have is going to make things way less daunting for you. It does take a little bit of effort, but it'll actually save you from making a failure of a painting right away. Okay, so it's worth it. Um, it's actually even worth to do it without mixing the colors if you've never painted at all with your tubes before, because think about it, how do you know what you have and what it looks like before you go put it onto a piece of something without testing it out a little bit? Especially if you have tube greens, though, put them into some unmixed squares and compare them to your greens that you mixed yourself from blue and yellow, or black and yellow, or black and yellow ochre. This is how you'll learn the first part of mixing landscape greens, which is more important to learn than how to learn, how to make the exact shape of each leaf. You work from general to specific, and the most general thing you need at the moment is to get your colors and values right. So you need to have a surface that's primed the same way as your canvas or board. That's what I did here. I used acrylic painting paper for this, and it comes primed, but then I primed it myself with the same gray primer that I use for my painting. I paint a lot of Irish landscapes. The background color I start with is gray a lot of time because that's the color of the sky here a lot of time. It's called acrylic paper, but you can use it with oil, especially if you prime or seal it first, like I did there. There's oil painting paper too, but I just had this around. Um, so I mix black and white primer to get a gray. I usually go a little bit lighter than that when I start, but anyway, some people see I don't like painting on bright white. There is some people who do. Most people, even if they're doing, if they're doing realism, they're probably going to start with a ground, which is like, something with one of the umbers used, diluted down, or like Italian earth, this color here. Um, so you can do that too. Anyway, what you're doing here is just measuring off a grid of squares and painting the swatches then with the mixtures, and then you label your swatches, the rows, A, B, C, D, E, F is what I've done across the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 across the side. And then you're going to be able to mark down in your notebook or your sketchbook what ones you've put in here. So if you look at A1, it's ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow. That's up here. Then I have ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow again, but I have cad yellow times 2 because I used a bit more yellow. And so just start off doing it basic like that. And as you go and fill in your swatches, you'll be able to see what notes you have to work with and how you got there. And then you'll have a much better idea when you go into your painting. So it's very important that you write those things down and keep a notebook there with you. For anything you mix, you want to keep a notebook there, okay? And make a mix, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. But yeah, you should always have a notebook when you paint and write down your mixtures. It seems like donkey work, but it'll make it so much easier. If you go and you do this, and you have a bunch of greens like this here, and then you are faced with a landscape that has 40 shades of green like we have here in Ireland, and whatever, you can say, let me check my notes, and you say that color grass looks like you know this green here, let me go and see how I made that, and then you'll be getting somewhere closer than if you just start making guesses and hoping for the best, and also put down what brands of paint you're using, because especially with the earth tones, also with the tube greens, they can vary from brand to brand. Even if you're not making a landscape or a painting with lots of greens, making swatches with corresponding notes is a great idea. You just won't know what you have until you start playing around with it, and it's better to do that on something that isn't your final work. Um, Even when you start out, you squirt out your bits of paint on your oil palette, it all looks quite dark, so like if you're looking at your palette here and you have different stuff on there, would you be able to pick out, your cobalt blue from your ultramarine or your Prussian blue? You know, um, so you should write down what you've put on your palette, and you should write down what you're making your mixtures out of, okay? Um, if you're just starting out as well, what you want to do is try to put your paints out in the same order all the time. If you can get used to doing that, I do recommend it. I do it to a certain extent. When I get really into it, sometimes I'll get a little bit more random because I'm running out of space on the palette.